Hi folks, it's Nick Wright here, and I wanted to talk a little bit about army building in Fantastic Battles, the fast play mass battle wargaming system for any fantasy setting. So the idea behind these rules, as it says there on the front, is that you can play your fantasy. You can build your army as you like it with very, very few restrictions. This is not a game where you'll be dictated to and be told that elves must have 50% of their army using bows or anything like that. If you want to have every elf in your army armed only with a sling, that's completely fine. That is up to you. You could have an army of really conventional dwarves with axes and spears. That's cool. Or you could have worms that squiggle around the table and shoot slime out of their butt. You know, whatever turns you on, it's your fantasy to play. So, what are the restrictions? There's not many. Your army is composed of characters and of companies. Characters are individuals. They command your army and they support it. They run around and give orders and maybe buff units, things like that. Companies are the bulk of your army and they're composed of multi-based figures. So here is an example of a unit of, or a company, of dwarven spearmen. Okay. So you see it's a multi-based company or multi-based block of figures. There's no figure removal in this game. So everything is based on your company. Companies can act individually as one company unit, or they can form up with up to 3 other units to form 4 company units. So each unit consists of between 1 and 4 companies. And it doesn't matter in game terms whether it's a single giant or maybe a beastie, a lamazu or a manticore or something like that, that still counts as one company. There are no restrictions on your companies, the number of companies that you build or what they're composed of. The only restrictions are on characters. Each army must consist of a single warlord. The warlord is the general, the commander-in-chief for your army. So that could be a human emperor, it could be an ogre king, a goblin chieftain. It's up to you. Whatever the theme is of your army, that's who your warlord is. The warlord gives commands and rallies units and provides a melee buff in fighting and also a resolve buff. So if he joins a unit, that unit is less likely to run away. Supporting the warlord, you have captains who have the same role but are much less effective. So again, captains could be minor chieftains, they could be princes, nobles, they could be slave drivers. Whatever your army theme is, that's what your captains are. You work that out for yourself. You can have up to 3 captains for every 500 points or part thereof in your army. So if you have a 450 point army, you can have 0 to 3 captains. If you have a 500 point army, 0 to 3 captains. If you have a 501 point army, you can have 0 to 6 captains, right? So 500 points or part thereof, you can have 0 to 3 captains. You can also have 0 to 1 magic user. And again, your magic user could be a sorceress or a cleric or whatever it is you want them to be. Each magic user picks from a range of spells. Normally you can choose up to 3 levels of spell. So you can be a magic user with a level 3 blessing or a magic user with a level 1 magic missile and a level 2 bless, if you like, or curse or whatever it is. You can have up to 3 spells per magic user, and you can have up to 1 magic user for every 500 points in your army or part thereof. Your army can then include a single rogue. A rogue is less effective at command than a captain, but more effective in melee and has special bonuses when fighting against other characters. So a rogue could be an assassin or an elite war dancer or a company champion, anything like that. That's it. Those are your character classes. So as I say, you can have up to 1 rogue in your entire army, up to 1 wizard for every 500 points or part thereof, up to 3 captains for every 500 points or part thereof, and you must have 1 warlord. Outside of that, the companies are completely up to you. Now, there is an army builder that was put together by Mike Wilson, one of our playtesters. So if I just share my screen, we can pop across and I'll show you how it works. So this army builder is in Excel, and it's available with the download of the rules from Wargames Vault, or you can download it from Board Game Geek or from the Facebook group for Fantastic Battles. And when you download it, it looks like this. It's already partly filled out with a whole range of example characters. You can see that there's different colored cells. White cells can have the text removed and changed. So these are manually edited cells. These bluey gray cells may actually be pink, but the color is not showing up particularly well on my screen. These pink cells can be changed from the drop-down box that pops up. Okay. And then these yellow cells autofill. So once you put in the information that you want, the other cells fill. So you can delete any information from the white or the pink cells by selecting it and just hitting the delete button. So here we are then with a blank army roster sheet. So what I thought I might do is run through building an army for you. So the example that we're going to take is an army that I have created called Ziggurat Dwarves. So there we go. The army name is Ziggurat Dwarves. We must have a warlord. And the warlord of my Ziggurat Dwarves, I call him, no I don't, I call him Gargamesh. Okay, and he is a warlord. So I click here and I select warlord. You'll see that then also fills his roster here. A warlord has a resolve of 2, a movement of 4, melee ability of 2. He has no shooting ability, a defense factor of 6, and a command range of 3 units. And that's it. The only thing that you add to characters is you can give them relics. Okay, that's the only way that you can modify them. And you'll see that there's about 12 different relics with different abilities that you can select from there. If you select one of them, you'll see that it will change your base points factor here. So this last column here is the number of bases. So that's the number of characters of that type, or the number of companies of that type that you have. So we want 1 warlord. That gives us a total of 60 points that were spent on warlords, and that goes up here into our points total. Gargamesh will be supported by 3 captains. Or let's make it 2. 2 captains. So again, we see our captains have a resolve of 1, a movement of 4, melee of 1, defense of 5, command range of 2. They cost 25 points each. We have 2 of them. So therefore we've added 50 points to our army total. We're then going to take a magic user. For that, we click down, we select our magic user from the characters, and we're going to have 1 of them. Adds 40 points to our total. So in just 4 characters, we're already up to 150 points. However, now we're going to add some units to our army. For my ziggurat dwarves, I want to have the bulk of the army being made up of these little spear and shield armed chaps. Okay, so we click on our drop-down box to see what units are available. There's 7 different base company types. You can see them here. There is an elite company, a formed company, and a regular company, fantastic beasts, dragons, ordnance batteries, or vehicles. Okay, so they all will have slightly different factors. If we put in a formed company, you'll see we have each company base will have a resolve of 4, a movement of 2, a melee factor of 3, and a defense of 5. Okay, so let's hear all these shield bearers. For each company then, we can give up to 3 traits. So you can see here there are columns trait 1, trait 2, and trait 3. Now, these dwarves, as we said, have long spears and they have shields. So we're going to go down and we will give them long spears. And we will give them a shield wall. Now there's 40 different traits to pick from. So you can see that combinations of traits 1, 2, and 3, and of 7 different company types leaves you with a couple of thousand options of how you build your troops. On top of your traits, we then have something called racial. Now this army allows you to have an extra trait. I wouldn't quite call it a bonus trait, but an extra trait, which is your racial trope. Okay, this is based on the idea that you might say that all of your goblins are unreliable, right? If you take up one of your 3 trait slots with unreliable, that really limits how you build your goblin units. So instead, we have a racial trope. So if these were goblins, we put unreliable into the racial trope, and then they could still choose up to 3 individual traits for each unit. Now, racial tropes only apply to units of a particular race, and what the racial trope is that you choose for your race is completely up to you. Okay. If you have an army, say you've got ziggurat dwarves supported by some goblins and a giant. For that racial trope, you can only pick 1 per army, and that applies only to units of that race. So you must have at least 50% of your army made up of 1 particular race in order to pick a racial trope. So in this case, we're going to say that the racial trope for dwarves is doughty, not doughy, as some of our playtesters have referred to it, but doughty. And you'll see when I put doughty in, it bumps our resolve up to 5. Okay, so if I take that away, the resolve is 4, but the doughty trait buffs up the resolve of a unit. So now for each of our companies, we have resolve of 5, movement 2, melee 3, defense of 5. Let's have 6 of these in our army. So that adds an extra 264 points to the army. I've added 6, but we know that our units have to be composed between 1 and 4 companies. So by having 6 companies, that means that I could choose to have 6 units of 1 company. I could have 1 unit of 4 companies and 1 unit of 2 companies. I could have 2 units of 3 companies and so on. Okay, so the flexibility is up to you, but whatever you start the game with, you can't change that after you've started playing. On top of our shield bearers then, I want to have our temple guards. Now the temple guards for my particular ziggurat dwarves are elite. So I will pick the elite company base profile. You'll see elite starts with resolve of 5, the same movement as a formed company, but they've got a better melee. Okay. The temple guards are also dwarves, so they will also be doughty. So here we go. Here is our little base of temple guards, and they're all carrying double-handed axes. So to reflect that in game terms, we'll look for the trait heavy melee weapons. Heavy melee weapons reduce the defense of the person that you're fighting down to 4. Okay. Later on, we might do a video of playing the actual game so you can see how these different factors come into play. But on top of that, let's also say that our Temple Guard are particularly well trained, so we will make them drilled. That gives them bonuses when changing formations. Let's take 4 of them. Then, what are we going to have to support all of these slow dwarves? We need to give them some sort of shooting capacity. So we'll give them some ballistas. Okay? Ballistas are artillery. So is our base profile. We're going to come down and select an ordnance battery. So you can see straight away, ordnance batteries have less resolve, less movement, less melee capacity, but they have a long-range shooting capability. They're crewed by our dwarves, so we'll say that they're doughty. These are artillery. We want them to shoot very long range, so we'll select artillery. And because they're shooting massive bolts, we want to call these heavy. So we'll come down and we'll call these heavy missile weapons. That's it. And to really spite our enemies, we're going to have a massive battery of 4 of these things. So that'll be massed firepower, even if, easily trampled if attacked in melee. We also might want to have a couple of support units. So one of the most thematic things I could think of, seeing as I'm basing these vaguely on a Mesopotamian aesthetic, is little flying carpets. Okay. So how do we make up our flying carpets? They look like they're crewed by little magic users, but all I would use them for is flying around and shooting. So let's say that they're some sort of acolytes on carpets. Not entirely sure how to do it, but we want them to be fast. And presumably if you've only got a couple of guys flying around on magic carpets, they're not going to be too tough. So we'll choose an irregular company as the base profile. So you can see now the resolve is much lower. They've only got a resolve of 3, but they've got a faster movement rate, the same melee as our shield bearers, a formed company, and these guys come with a default short range ability and a defense of 4. They're still dwarves, so they will still be doughty. And for our traits then, the first thing is they're flying, because they are flying on flying carpets. So we'll give them flying. And let's just say that all of their magic just functions like a shooting attack. So we'll come down and we'll give them shooting. So there's 3 different shooting traits that you can choose. Shooting is the basic one. Shooting mixed is a lower quality shooting. So you're shooting, I'll just show you, sure. If we go for shooting, the melee factor drops down to show that the unit itself is not armed with melee weapons necessarily, but it gives you a short range of 3 and a long range of 2. If we drop it, or if we bring it down to shooting mixed, you'll see that gives you a lower shooting factor, short range of 2, long range of 1, but it doesn't impact on the melee. So the melee stays as 3. So in this case, I think we will call them just normal shooting. So these are going to be flying support for the flanks of our dwarven shield walls. And let's have one of them. Okay. What you might see, coming back up to our ballistae, with an ordnance battery, it doesn't start with a short range shooting attack. And this is to represent things like catapults and Ballistic that have a trajectory that fire up and over. So if troops get in too close to them, they can get underneath the range of the guns. What we're going to do for our Ballistic is lower them a little bit and just give them the thrown weapons trait. Even though it's not a thrown weapon as such, it gives them a weaker short-range attack just there. So that's the basic principles of how you build your army. If you have strange things though, like this chap here, that's a genie. And we all know that genies are super powerful magic users. So how do we have a company that is also a magic user and is able to cast spells? So we'll have our Jinn, or our genie. We're going to call him a fantastic beast. He is not a dwarf, he's a genie, so he doesn't get the racial trope. For trait 1, we're going to say that he is ephemeral. Okay, ephemeral means that he can pass through things and is harder to hit when being shot at. Then we'll come down and we will give him a character trait. So we will call him a character magic user. He is still a company, but he now also counts as a magic user. When normal characters attach to a unit, say we have a captain attaching to a unit, you just put them next to or on the base. They buff the unit, but they can be killed separately, or they can choose to leave the unit. Okay, so the buff is temporary. When you have a character company, like our genie here, the character is an innate ability of the company itself. So we've said that our genie is an ephemeral magic user. Okay, and you'll see also that it buffs the traits here. So if we take away the magic user, you'll see that the resolve is 5, the melee is 4. But if we put the magic user back in again, the resolve jumps up to 6 and the melee jumps up to 5. So it's as if a character has attached to the unit, but it's an innate part of the unit. If you were statting up something like our lamazu here that has a character riding it, the idea is that that would count as a character and a lamazu. So this might be our warlord Gargamesh. Okay, he's riding a lamazu. Now in game terms, I might not want him to ever come off his lamazu. I want that to be his mount. So I don't need to have a separate model for it if I don't want. But there has to be the ability that Gargamesh can be killed and the lamazu can be left without a rider. So we would count that as our warlord up here, and then we would create a new profile for the lamazu itself. Our lamazu is going to be a fantastic beast. It's not a dwarf itself, so it's not doughty. Our lamazu is definitely going to fly because he has wings. We're going to say he's a fairly intelligent creature, being a guardian of wisdom and knowledge. So we are going to say that he can take a passenger. So if you have characters that are attached to units or monsters, they have to do what the unit does. However, if you have the passenger trait, the character can use any of its special abilities as well as doing what the unit does. So our character on the lamazu can fly backwards and forwards across the battlefield, while the character riding on the top is able to use his rallying ability, okay, and giving commands. So we'll give him the passenger trait. We'll have one Jinn, one lamazu. I think I spelled that correctly. And you'll see now our army is up to 934 points. Okay. For people, once they've had a few games and they've gotten into the swing of things, you can change things around a bit by taking strategies. You can have up to 3 strategies per army. You see, there are 8 different strategies to choose from. For example, if you take an agent, they can poison units or make units disgruntled in the opposing army before the game even starts. If you take ambush, you can deploy troops within pieces of terrain further forward than your deployment area. Cloaks and daggers allows you to take an additional rogue in your army. Okay, so each of those strategies does something different. They're slightly overpriced in terms of points, but they allow you to do unique stuff. So just for the sake of it, let's say that we have a night march, which allows us to deploy further forward, a quartermaster, who will provision all of our troops a bit better, and let's take a drill master as well. So the drill master allows me to turn one of my captains into a drill master. When he attaches to a unit, they become automatically drilled. So it's a cheaper way of getting drilled units, but it's all down to the character being attached. Now we have an army at 980 points, or 979. But hopefully you can see that it's a fairly intuitive way of doing things. If you want to have, for example, some halflings join your army, here's a little unit of halfling chefs with a cauldron, okay? You'd say, right, what are my halflings going to be like? So let's call them halfling militia. So you might say halflings are rubbish in combat, so they're always going to have the lowest melee factor. But that's not quite how we have to do this. That halfling militia is going to be quite slow. So we're going to take a formed company with a base movement of 4. However, halflings are rubbish in melee, traditionally. You might have a different vision, and in that case, you play them how you want to. But my vision is they're wee folk, they're not particularly tough. So we are going to take the militia special ability, and that drops their base melee factor by 1. However, my halflings are carrying a kitchen with them, and whenever they get beaten up, they want to be able to go back to their kitchen and have something to eat. So that allows them to regenerate. So we are going to have regenerate as an extra trait for our halflings. Okay, so you might also have regenerate for lizardmen or for trolls, but to mix it up a bit, to surprise your opponents, why not have regenerate for halflings with their portable kitchen? So that shows the halflings going back, getting a good feed, and being ready to fight their opponents again. So hopefully you can see that it really is a fairly straightforward army building system and incredibly flexible. Next time, if I have the nerve to make another video, we might have a look at the pre-game system. Because in a regular wars, you build your army, you set up the table, you deploy your troops, and then you start rolling for mishaps. And that's when your cunning plan all falls apart before the enemy have even rolled their first dice. But that will do for now. Thanks, folks, for joining in. If you've got any questions, let me know. Cheerio.